Welcome to Agents Growth Academy. Get ready to grow big or go home. Class is now in session. Folks, I am super excited to bring on none other than James Jenkins today, who's going to talk about using tech and smart workflows to maximize profit and minimize profanity. I love that. Fantastic. James Jenkins is the founder and CEO of RiskWell, located in McKinney, Texas. He leads a team that has become a nationally recognized industry leader in delivering solutions for real estate investors and hard-to-place trade, general, and prime contractors. James holds the CIC, CRM, and CPC, soon-to-be CPCU designation coming soon in 2022. He serves as an advisor for multiple insurance industry vendors and carriers, and as a keynote speaker on the subjects of technology implementation and commercial line sales and marketing. James is the host of Agency Freedom Podcast, which has more than 4,000 monthly downloads and helps agency principals and team members migrate from the captive agency channel and thrive once they're on the independent side of the industry. James is on a mission to help lead and drive evolution in technology, automation, and workflow innovation in the independent agency retail sector across the country. During his personal time, if he has any, James enjoys spending quality time with his wife and 2 young kids. James, what is up, my brother?
I got to be honest, man. If I knew you were going to read that whole thing on the show, I would have cut that down by like half at least. So for all the listeners that just sat through that blah, 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 blah,
I think they were really captivated.
Yeah, definitely.
You're a captivating man of mystery.
I tell my publicist to give me a short version next time. Holy cow.
What's going on?
Thanks for having me, Jam. This is a lot of fun. It's refreshing to be on this side of the microphone and not the one asking the questions, because yeah, I definitely appreciate the position that you're in, having to drive the conversation and make good use of our listeners' time today.
Well, we'll see how I do. You know, I want to be James Jenkins when I grow up. So this is a great honor to have you on the show and try to model what you do. Although I will never have the super sexy man voice that you have.
I never know what to say to that kind of a comment other than thank you. I think I don't know if I can take credit for it, because last time I checked, the good Lord gave me all of that. It's so funny because I'm 6'6", and I always get the wow, you're taller than I thought you were. And I was like, taller than my profile picture, the headshot that I have on social. Wow, I don't know what to say to that comment that makes no sense at all.
Well, that brings new light to something you and I were talking about off mic, which is the fact that we are both photographers, and you used to have an actual photography business. I have a website that just like teaches people how to do it on their own, but I can't imagine how far down you have to bend. I'm only 5'6". You've got a good foot on me, but if you're bending down to take photos of your kids at kid level, that's a long way to go.
Oh yeah, man. Yeah, my knees got to work out, that's for sure. No, my son is a little beanpole. He's 4.5. My daughter Emmy is a little more than 2, but she's already obviously got my genes. And my wife is 5'3". So honestly, I'm really curious what happens with them. And honestly, it sounds like something that's even ridiculous to complain about. But the world is not designed for someone who is 6'6". There's so many things that are annoying about being 6'6". Oh, yeah. So I'm like, hey, can I get some more of the 5'3" in my kids? I mean, if my son ends up, 6'1" or 6'2", okay, that's a lot more reasonable. You're not going to find yourself cramming your knees into everything.
I love it.
So anyways,
yeah,
whatever.
my father is maybe used to be 6'4". God bless you, Dad. Just turned 75 a couple of days ago, and on his way to shrinking back down to my size, which is fantastic. My mom used to be 5'4". Are probably 5'2" and shrinking. So my son is already taller than me, which I'm excited about. Excited for bigger things, literally, for him.
Yeah, you said he's what, 16? Is that right?
Yeah, he's 16. Yep.
Awesome. I bet he never lets you forget that he's taller than you, does he?
Every single day, James. I'm not kidding. He will, because he comes in and he hugs me and he's like, "Hello, little man." And I'm like, dude, you're only an inch taller than me. Just like check
Oh
your
gosh.
ego. You're fine.
Well,
James,
and that's
I'm
when he gives you the Vin Diesel from Fast and Furious. It doesn't matter if you win by an inch or a mile. Winning is winning.
don't inflate his ego.
I won't tell him I said that. Don't worry.
Yeah, please don't. Yeah. Oliver, you're not allowed to listen to this podcast. I'm super curious, your the kind of the pivotal moment for you. And I listened to Agency Freedom, fantastic podcast. I think you're doing a great thing, especially for like your niche of people who are held captive and trying to break free. I love that.
Yeah.
And I think there's probably a whole lot of things, I'm sure that, and I've heard it on your shows before, that you had to learn on your own and that you're now teaching, for free, sometimes for free. And this
Yeah.
concept of using tech and smart workflows to maximize profit and minimize profanity. What was there like a pivotal moment for you where you realized, oh my gosh, I've got to put some things in place to make work easier for me and work smarter, not harder?
Well, I think first off, everything is free. I got to make that really clear. I'm not charging for anything at this point.
At
I
this
will
point.
at some point in the future if somebody wants one-on-one, like if I'm making a visit to someone's office, obviously there's a fee attached to that. But the
Sure.
content now and for at least the next year and a half, like 100% free. There's no pitch, there's no sell ever, which I think is part of the value.
That's
There's so
awesome.
many people out there that have guru programs, and
Yeah.
sometimes it seems like their content is nothing but a lead in for them to pitch you something, but
Right.
whatever. That's beside the point.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think there wasn't one individual moment of, oh, shoot, that happened with me. I think it was simply coming out of the captive world where everything is done for you.
Yeah.
Your sales and marketing, your AMS, your CRM, the phone system, the lead generation, just about everything is handed to you on a silver platter with corporate agreements that the carrier has. You don't
Yep.
have any choice in anything. So
Yeah.
when I made the decision to sell, I was a farmer's agent for 6.5 years. When I made the decision to sell, part of the attraction, I should say, of being an independent agent was the ability to do whatever you want with every single piece of your agency, from the tech stack to ops, to the way you run your team, HR, compliance, market selection and stewardship, down the
Yeah.
list. Everything is whatever you want. There's nobody that can tell you how to do your agency,
Yeah.
which as we talk about a little bit in AFP is, decision fatigue is a real thing. And we, as agency principals, as business owners, we only have a certain number of hours. That 168 hours gets sliced up into whatever pie fragment you decide to put it into.
Mhm.
But there really is such a thing as decision fatigue. So I've been really intentional over the last 2.5 years of taking one step at a time, and quarter by quarter by quarter, year by year, really having intentional, focused activity in one direction.
Hmm.
Like for 21, as anybody who's listened to AFP, and I don't want to be reductive and assume that your listeners are also my listeners. I think that would be a mistake. But
A lot
I
of them probably
hired
will
a
be after
fractional
this.
CFO. Maybe, who knows? I just want to add value to our industry. That's for sure.
That's right.
I don't have any background in financial knowledge. So I hired a fractional CFO, Don and Ro Polzinski, a RD advisory group out of New York. A lot of my friends and colleagues use them, recommended them. That's great because I don't know the first thing about finance and accounting from a running an agency perspective. My background knowledge was dangerously lacking. And then from there, it was really just working through the process of documenting core processes along the way. Basically this entire year, my team is probably spitting nails because they're so tired of hearing me talk about documenting core processes. We ended up hiring Mick Hunt and Premier Strategy Box to assist with that process of codifying and documenting the processes for literally everything from the sales life cycle to the client experience. We made the decision to carve out and have a completely dedicated client experience team. Our sales team does sales and only sales. They don't service.
Yep.
We have a dedicated CX team, as we call it, that handles everything from the point of sale afterwards. They identify cross-sell opportunities and then hand the ball back to the producer to quote and sell whatever the cross-sell is. And then when the producer's done, he hands it right back to the CX team for stewardship. So just the process of getting all that laid out really has taken almost the entirety of 21. So I know that wasn't exactly the question you asked, but I think the biggest thing is do not, for the love, don't try to do everything at once.
Yeah,
The
because that's where
t-shirt
my
that,
mind was going at first, was like, oh, this, I have shiny thing syndrome, like a lot of
yeah.
entrepreneurs do, right? And
Mm-hmm.
it's like, oh, let's do this, let's do that, let's do that. But you are so right, because we've spent some time in our own agency documenting core processes, but I still think we have a lot of work to do on that, because we made a bunch of acquisitions over the course of our lifetime, and there's a lot of different ways of doing things. So like trying to hone in on that has to
Yeah.
be the first thing before you start adding other layers of technology on, right?
Well, in one of the things that I talked about in Tampa when I delivered my keynote on technology was step one is get your headspace figured out and asking yourself the question of what do you want your tech to do for you?
Mm-hmm.
Before we even have the vendor selection conversation, even beginning it, you have to figure out what does my ideal client journey look like during the sales cycle? And then when that switch gets flipped and they say yes and they become a client, then the real life cycle begins. And what happens at that point? What do you want your policy term to look like?
Yeah.
What are the touch points? What are
Mm-hmm.
the value add services you're going to bring to the conversation? Before we even have the tech or workflow conversation, we really have to have the what do you want this to look like from a look and feel sort of perspective.
Yeah.
Because if you don't know the direction you want the ship to go, it's really hard to steer, and it's hard to know when you get there.
Yeah, absolutely.
So no, I also have shiny object syndrome, where it's very easy to get distracted. So many people, and in the insurance groups I'm in, there's so many conversations of, who do you guys use for insert vendor category here? And
Yeah.
I find that as kind of reductive and not quite a zero sum game, but close to it because there is inherent tribalism that comes into the conversation immediately. Without getting into the psychology of things, we as humans have an inherent bias towards our own decision making, and we feel a evolutionary need to reaffirm our own decisions. So
Mm-hmm.
if we picked a vendor, we are more than likely going to be putting that vendor out there and proselytizing for the values and merits of that vendor, whether or not they're the right fit for somebody else. There's so many variables that go into your agency and mine and your listeners and everybody else. I love the way Nick Ayers, one of the co-founders of
Yeah.
IAOA, approaches the conversation. When someone asks, well, what's the best CRM? He goes, what kind of agency are you?
Yeah.
Are you personal lines direct bill only? Do you do E&S? Do you do agency bill? Do you do commercial lines? Do you do life and health? Talk to me about the way your team operates. How many seats are we talking about? Because, the agency that only needs 3 seats is going to probably pick a different vendor than the agency that needs 25 seats. So there's so much nuance in the tech conversation. I think for the listeners to start to wrap their head around it, if they're not already well underway, is simply asking those questions of what do you want this to look like? And then, go from there based on, plugging in, the vendors that are appropriate for the various spots in the tech stack.
I love it. Yeah, I talk a lot about our dear, late friend Stephen Covey. Begin with the end in mind. I think it's habit number 2, or maybe habit number 1. I can't remember. But right, to your point, what do you want it to look like? Because if you don't know that, it's like me trying to get to McKinney, Texas. If I don't know where McKinney is in Texas, it's gonna be really hard for me to get there. If I don't even have I don't even know where it is, let alone having a roadmap or GPS.
Well, whether it's business planning or it's, in this case, at this time of year, so many people are doing their strategic plan for the upcoming year, setting revenue targets and setting, sales and marketing activities. It's really hard to build that out in an effective way if you don't have exactly what your end goal is. Because then from there, I mean, it's simple math. You just reverse engineer your funnel. Like we talked about in Agency Freedom, we had like a 15-minute conversation in one of those episodes of hacking your funnel. Okay, well, what are the spots in your funnel? Like, what are the different levels? What do they look like? Okay, do you know your numbers? Have you looked at the conversion elements from one stack, one tier of the funnel to the next one? Do you know how many people move from lead to prospect, from appointment made to appointment kept, from quotes delivered to quotes bound? Do you know what those numbers are? Because if you don't, well, step one is you better freaking know your numbers, or else the rest of it's just really, really hard to figure out if you don't know your basic numbers.
So what I'm hearing you say is, if you don't know that stuff, may as well not even contact the first tech recommendation that anybody gave you, or the second one, or the third one. You got to have that stuff nailed down. Know who you are first before you figure out if who you want to be is going to align with what that tech vendor is going to be able to provide. Is that what you're saying?
I think that's a fair assessment. Yeah. So many agents, myself included at times, we bring a lot of unfair expectations to the conversation, where it's almost like we're going to the vendor and saying, fix my agency.
Yeah.
And it's like in a dating relationship, if you're a naturally codependent and pathetic person, and you're going into a first date saying, please love me, please validate my existence. Like, that's just weird, first off. But it's a really dysfunctional relationship that will probably be short-lived, because that person is going to go, get away from me, you freak show. And a lot of vendors probably feel that way about us as agency principals of, hey, can we just have an open conversation about expectations, the value offering of a insert vendor here. But bringing clear expectations to the picture, I think, is really important. We got to have a certain amount of things done ourselves, and it really just gets back to, and this is kind of a cliche thing to say, and I have to acknowledge that, are we trying to be really good insurance agents, or are we trying to be really good and efficient and effective and profitable business owners? Because you want to talk about me banging a drum, those two things are very, very different. Most captive agents, at best, are good insurance agents. Most captive agents, insert company here, AmFam, Farmers, Allstate, State Farm, Farm Bureau, whatever, insert carrier, doesn't matter. They intentionally breed good agents and poor business owners, because the more someone understands the business of insurance, the more they recognize that the captive distribution channel is by far the most tilted in favor of the carrier.
Yeah.
So, and I think very strongly about that. And I don't have any idea what the distribution of your listeners are. I would assume most of them are independent agents. Mm-hmm. So I don't need to beleaguer that particular point. But knowing your numbers, understanding your basic, KPIs, key performance indicators.
Yep.
You got to figure that out before you document core processes or make vendor selections or work on best practices or build out your manual for your training and hiring and development plan for your team members. Like, you got to start at zero. Do you know your basics? What's your vision and core values for your office? Why do you exist?
Yeah.
What's the reason why you walk in the door at your office?
Yeah.
Because if it's just making money and getting someone to say yes, I don't know if that's a compelling reason in this day and age.
Yeah. I'm so glad to hear that for just selfishly, because we spent the last 2 years in our agency rediscovering who we are and uncovering what our core values are in our own agency. And that was literally done through an exercise that I've talked about tons of times on this podcast, but just basically identifying the best of the best and then figuring out what makes them tick, and then boiling down the best of those elements and figuring out, what our core values are out of those people. And it's so funny because once you have that, and then you can start, like you said, documenting those core processes, I think getting the right accountability in place, the organization of an agency is super important as well, because if the lanes aren't clearly defined, And you alluded to it before, by separating the sales and the service and having them volley back and forth and make for a really good, healthy tennis match, so to speak, rather than like just balls
Hmm.
and rackets flying everywhere. It's that's super critical, I think.
Well, and communicating that separation, just to double click on that one thing before I pivot back to the values, because there's one thing I want to get to there.
Yeah.
Communicating that as early as possible in the process, so
Yeah.
it doesn't feel like a bait and switch at the altar.
Yeah.
When you've been dating the producer the whole time, and
Right.
then you finally get the prospect says yes, and you get to the altar and you say yes, and then it's like handing you off to someone you've never met, never spoken to, have no rapport with, who doesn't understand you. It's like you were dating someone, you got married, and then at the altar, someone else stepped in, and you had to be married to a different person. It's like, no, that's how most agencies, myself included, up to a
Yeah.
couple of months ago,
Yeah.
operated with the whole sales versus service thing. So we were really intentional with communicating during the sales process. Hey,
Yeah.
Mr. and Mrs. Prospect, here is how RiskWell operates, and asking for permission. Hey, do you mind if I tell you just a couple of things that are different of how we operate, probably
Mhm.
different from what your expectations are from the previous agencies that you've had servicing you? And then we just go in and tell them philosophically, this is how we operate. This is why we feel like it's an important way to do things. And we introduce the service team during the sales process of,
Mhm.
once you say yes, and it's kind of a little bit of psychological trick there because you're literally just assuming the sale and breaking that fourth wall, kind of like in Deadpool when he
Yeah.
talks right to the camera.
Yeah.
It's like, once you say yes and you become a client, at that point, you will transition into a client relationship rather than a prospect relationship. At that moment, something magical happens, and our CX team, our client experience team, takes over. At that point, I will no longer be your primary point of contact. I'm always here if you need something, if you have a big picture question or you want to talk strategy about something. However, once you become a client, you don't call me with routine service requests. We have a dedicated team that is your first point of contact. You're never going to get a call center. You're never going to get a recording unless literally everyone on the team is busy at that moment. Then you'll hit our phone tree and be able to leave a message if literally every line is taken up at this moment. Outside of that, you're going to get a human being every time you call.
Yeah.
And just communicating that during the sales process, we found to be really effective.
I love that. And it's something I've mentioned on the show a lot too, is that one person in our organization, John Hall, who is our COO, he does a phenomenal job of setting expectations with clients. And that's exactly what you're talking about. It's just, it's setting expectations so that
Yep.
if they know what to expect, they will willingly go along with practically anything that you put before them, as long as it's reasonable and, price conscious and coverage rich.
Well, the beauty of it is, if they don't like it, they can self-select their way out of your funnel,
Yeah.
and they will make everyone's life better, because when you present it that way and you're telling them up front, this is how we're going to do it. So if you don't like it, buzz off.
Yeah.
Just, one of the steps in our automated workflow with the communication that goes out after the recommendation is delivered, it simply says, hey, what's our status here? Yes, we obviously want to do business with you, but we don't mind no either. We don't have a problem with no, because all that tells us is that wasn't a good mutual fit. For whatever reason, you didn't find the value that we wanted you to find, and that's cool. No big deal. What we really don't like is silence. We hate silence. I would much rather get either yes or a no. I would prefer no to silence 100% of the time. And so
Yeah.
telling them that in a text message and an email after like a week of no action with something being delivered and follow-ups and whatever, there's a lot of value that comes from telling someone, we don't mind no. If no is your answer, that's cool. Please tell us right now. We don't want
Yeah.
to go another 30 days of ping pong and then find out that, oh, a month ago I made a different decision, but I didn't have the guts to tell you. I didn't want to hurt your feelings. Like,
Yeah.
calling that out in the communication, in the text message, in the email, of going, our feelings are more hurt if we have to chase you and get ghosted. That
Yeah.
really annoys us.
Yeah.
So let us know. If you made another decision, it's okay.
Yeah. I love it. I love
So,
it.
anyways, I know I just chased a rabbit there for like 3
No,
minutes.
you're good. You're
Um,
good.
Have you read Lencioni, Patrick Lencioni's book, The
Five
Five Dysfunctions of a Team?
Dysfunctions. Yes. Yeah. Great book.
Okay. So you know where I'm going then, because the values conversation, there's two sets of values. There's the values that you put in your entryway in your front office that the client sees, and then there's the internal core values that are designed only for your team. And I think that is one distinction that I didn't make until I read that book. And I'm like, he's totally right. Holy crap. I never thought of it that way. You've got your external core values, but then you also have an internal set of core values as well.
Yeah.
And I think that's one thing that a lot of agents just flat out skip, because they don't think about that, the internal, when at the end of the day, your team, the people that choose to work at your office, really are the VIP clients if you think about it.
Yeah, that's a good point.
You know what I mean? Do you really care if will it end your business if any insured walks away? I sure hope not.
Right.
But if you lose one or two core team members, it just might feel like it ended your business, because your ability to operate is dramatically altered. So those team members really are your VIP clients.
Yeah. That's a great way to look at it. I love it. It's so true. And when we have lost people in the past that it really hurt, I mean, it felt like a bad breakup, right? And it shook us to our core and made us reevaluate things.
I would much rather have a mutual separation. Yeah. Losing someone that we didn't want to lose. I've never had to go through that. Thankfully, we've only been around for 2.5 years. We only have 5 people on the team, myself being the 6th one. I'm sure at some point someone's going to leave that I didn't want to leave. Someone's going to get poached or just decide the industry is not for them anymore. And yeah, that's going to be a kick to the groin for sure.
Yeah. Good point. Are you ready for our rapid fire round?
We're already there, huh?
We're already there, man. Yeah. I mean, unless there was something that was like burning on your chest and I want you to get it out.
No, bro. No, I'm just surprised how quickly 25 minutes went. I know we're trying to keep it around 30 minutes.
Yeah, it goes by so fast.
Well, your listeners are like, I'm so glad he's done rambling.
No, man. I think they're getting something good out of it.
God, we got a podcast host for guests. This one's going to be bad.
Son of a...
Oh, man.
What's and this kind of ties.
What you got? Rapid fire, man.
Yeah, it kind of ties in a little bit to what we were talking about with tech. What's one piece of technology or software you can't live without, knowing that it's specific to what you and your agency needs?
We do a lot of E&S, a lot of agency bill. And this just happened recently. I caught some flack from pretty publicly saying that I was shopping my AMS. We use Now Certs. And we have since the very beginning. And I hadn't shopped them in a while, and I was generally unhappy with certain things of operating inside of Now Certs. Ended up being a lack of training, a lack of understanding of best practices on the platform. But I was pretty public that I was shopping them. And I got a call from Peter Germanoff, the CEO, and he was like, hey, why don't you just let me know if you're unhappy about something? And it was a really nice little heart-to-heart. But I mean, I shop them with all the options available, with the exception of Applied Epic, because the cost per seat is literally 3x of what we're paying right now. And just from a cash flow perspective, it's not really a consideration yet.
Sure.
But Now Certs for us, because we're heavy in E&S, we're heavy in agency bill. They do all the usual stuff good, but anybody can do Ivan's downloads and basic policy data. Yeah. Their open API is really, really friendly to tech. It makes it very easy for companies like Ascend and Wonderwrite and Fetch Underwriting and Glovebox and these other, secondary vendors. Mm-hmm. I think of the AMS, the website, and the CRM as basically like your core primary vendors. You absolutely have to have those 3 or 4, a phone system, a VoIP phone system. Outside
AMS
of those 4 vendors,
and what?
AMS, a conversion-focused website, and the CRM, and then the phone system, VoIP, phone, text, voicemail. You basically, those are absolutely non-negotiables. Everything else is, I would consider in that second tier of really important, but you don't necessarily have to have a client self-service portal. You don't have to have that, tool that makes the discovery go so much faster, et cetera. But yeah,
Yeah.
I think if you don't have a really, really good relationship with your management system, then you got a problem.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. Love it. One book you already talked about. Was that the one? One book that you love or you're reading or that you would highly recommend?
As far as, something as an alternative to the actual Bible, and I'm a big fan of that one. I definitely would identify as an evangelical Christian, but that's outside the scope of this conversation. The two books that I think every insurance agent should read. The first one is Sales EQ by Mr. Jeb Blount, Blount, and then the second one is Never Split the Difference. And I am blanking on the author, right? And I could see his face. He's a hostage negotiator for the FBI. Blanking on the name of the author of Never Split the Difference.
We'll get it in there. I don't have the web pulled
that's
up.
fine.
Yeah, so
yeah, but those two,
I've heard of that.
I think every agent should read. I use them literally every day. They're so important that I forgot the author's name.
Well, the content was much more important, wasn't it?
There you go.
Do you listen to things on Audible or do you always read? Or
I try, if it's really important, I'll read it the second time. Audible's kind of like the first string. And if something's good on Audible, then I'll typically buy the paper book on Amazon and add it to the library. We have a
same way.
lending library of sorts here in the office where anybody on my team can grab a book off the shelf and read it and put it back when they're done. But yeah,
I'm a
little bit neurotic.
Yeah, I it's almost like giving it a test run to see if it's something that I want to dig into, open, and actually make notes, which is what I do. If you look at any of my books, there's so much underlining and stars and notes and stuff, so I can go back to it. And for anybody listening, if you want to do the same thing, you can get a free Audible book just by going to audibletrial.com/growbig, and they'll give you a free book. I think you get like 30 days or something like that, and then I think even a reduced rate after that. But
the author of Never Split the Difference is Chris Voss. I just Googled it.
Oh yeah. I remember that.
Now I'm just like, of course you did. No, I've only read that book like 12 times. I can't believe I forgot Chris Voss's name.
It's okay. He'll forgive you. A time when you or someone else effectively used storytelling in the sales or service process. Probably like every day, right?
It really is, man. Storytelling, I think, is the most effective way to sell something. Because instead of arguing with someone on a coverage item, I love the question of, okay, valid. That's a valid concern. So tell me, what's your plan for when insert bad situation happens?
Yeah.
Oh, well, we do business with Amazon Web Services. Everything we do is in the cloud. Okay. No, I can understand that. That's a valid concern. Hey, tell me, when your system gets compromised and your login credentials to your cloud system, when they get compromised and someone gets access to all of your data, do you think Amazon is going to hold you harmless and defend your interest when the lawsuits start flying? How are you going to handle that when Amazon hangs you out to dry on a cyber liability claim? So stories are woven throughout the fabric of RiskWell. Everything we do is story based if we're doing it correctly.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite one?
I don't know, man. It's really just like people that didn't take our advice and bad things happen to them, like claim situations where it's like, I told you this was going to happen.
Yeah.
Nothing sticks out to me as in particular. There's so many times where a claim happened and someone, didn't take our advice on a coverage item, or they opted for, a 3% wind hail deductible because they wanted to save $400 on premium. I mean, we've all been there. There's dozens of those stories.
Yeah.
I think really, because I know stories are super important to you, I think with regard to story and just wrapping your head around it, a great book to read is Building a Story Brand by Donald Miller. I know you've read it probably many times, but just the whole concept of stop trying to be the hero.
Yeah.
Like the insured is the hero. Everyone wants to be the protagonist in their own story. So when you fashion yourself as the hero of the insured story, you're creating an inherent conflict between yourself and the insured, because the insured wants to be the hero in their own story. So
Yeah.
I know that's an entirely separate interview for a different
Sure.
day, but stories are critical.
Yeah. Love it. Do you have a daily or a weekly habit that you feel like has led to success for you, either over
I
time or
think
recently?
I definitely this year I got more consistent with it. I've said all the right things for the whole time RiskWell's been in existence, but 2021 really is the first year that I actually did it somewhat consistently. There's still a lot of room for improvement next year. It really is activity blocking.
Mm.
Of a lot of people do what they call time blocking,
Mhm.
or time management, which I think is just a silly phrase, because you have the same 168 hours as everybody else. You don't manage time. Time manages you. That's one of my go-to phrases.
Yeah.
But activity management and choosing and directing how you spend your time,
Mhm.
be really, really selfish and intentional with those money hours. And being selfish with your time, being intentional with your time, has a bit of a negative connotation. Like, so many people praise those who are very giving and generous with their time, and there's definitely a place for that.
Mhm.
But I'll follow my friend and colleague Brandon Smith's example, who takes all of his meetings on Thursday. And unless something is majorly on fire, you're not getting his time outside of Thursday if you're
Mm.
another agent. If you're another agent and you ask for his time, he's probably going to give it to you, because he's a welcoming and generous guy. But he's going to tell you to schedule time on Thursday,
Yeah.
because he won't take a meeting outside of Thursday with another agent.
Yeah.
So just as an example, yeah, that kind of diligence with your time really pays massive dividends, in my opinion.
I love that. I've been trying to be better about that, and as well, like what you talked about, scheduling activities instead of just blocks of time. I literally did that last night for this week, trying to rethink how to do it. And I literally just named on my calendar what I was going to be doing instead of just saying like, like block off, hold, whatever. And it's already made a difference. So I I love that. And I love maybe reducing the amount of time. I totally get what you're saying too about feeling like I'm being like selfish is almost a negative thing, because I want to be very giving, and I feel like I have been, but I also feel like I've
Yeah.
almost been too giving, and maybe I need to rein it in a little bit. So that's this is like
Well,
this
the
is hitting home
concept of being
personally.
intentionally selfish, like being intentionally selfish and being intentionally generous. It's time is water.
Mm.
It slips through your fingers so fast if you're not being intentional with it. If you try to hold water in your hands and it's not in a bowl, or an Nalgene bottle or something, it's going to go right through your fingers. But if you're intentional with what you do with the water, you get to keep it.
I love that. That was deep,
Was
man.
that the fifth one?
Well, one final piece of advice for our audience based on what we talked about today.
Man, I have so many of these conversations, and it always just comes back to, whatever you're doing, just be really intentional. Life happens so fast.
Yep.
Opportunities come up, and then they pass and they fade away, and you missed them so stinking fast. And the fact that it's already 2:55 Central and I feel like my day just got started, but in an hour, or an hour and 55 minutes, at 4:50, I'm leaving this office and I'm going home. I'm taking off the work hat. I'm putting on the dad hat, and I am
Yeah.
fully present at that point. And
Yeah.
nothing at work matters at that point, as
Dude,
I am at home.
yeah, you and Carruthers both said the same thing. And I love that. Like taking off
It
that work hat, man. That's so important for us to have kids right now. That
it is. If I go back to Brandon again, because I love me some Carruthers. He is my older brother in so many ways. Yeah, mentor doesn't begin to describe the relationship. But Brandon Smith has said it's not a matter of 50-50 or work life balance. It's a matter of whatever you're doing. If you're at home, be all home. If you're at the office, then be 100% present at the office. This life is so short. Whatever you're doing, be fully engaged. And that's really the message that I would leave is it doesn't matter what you're doing. It doesn't matter what your activity is. If you don't love it, if it doesn't light you up, if it's not something that touches your passions in an existential way, you're doing something wrong. And you only get one life, so you should probably change what you're doing.
I love it, man. You're lighting me up. And like we could do a whole show on that and like how teenagers are spending their time and not being engaged and being engaged in their phones. And yeah. Amen, brother. I love it. One bonus surprise question. Are you ready?
Ooh.
If I said to you right now, hey, James, I'm going to send you some soup or I'm going to send you some marshmallows, which would you choose?
What kind of soup?
What kind do you like?
My answer is soup because I'm not a marshmallow fan unless it's in hot chocolate.
I love it.
And only then if it's the really small marshmallows, not the giant ones. It has to be the marshmallows that dissolve into the hot chocolate. I would say probably like chicken tortilla or something spicy. I don't know.
Love it.
I love me some soup. I'm an equal opportunity soup eater. If it's soup, I'm probably interested.
I love it. Well, I'm going to send you some soup from a company called Spoonful of Comfort because we have sent that to our employees as a thank you this last year, and they absolutely loved it. And the packaging is amazing. What's inside besides the soup is amazing. And I want you to experience it. So I'll get your address off,
I'm down.
off Mike.
Thanks, man.
But yeah, absolutely.
That's good.
I want to say
this was
thank
fun.
you for being on. Yeah.
Well, man, thanks for having me, man. This was great.
Yeah, absolutely, my friend. Where can people find you if they want to get some more James Jenkins in their life?
The podcast is probably the most useful thing just because you can, look at the episode titles and decide what's relevant for you at that moment. We only have 31 episodes that are out at this point, so the back catalog isn't quite as extensive as it will be this time next year.
You're about a third ahead of me, so.
Oh, cool. Good deal. So just visit agencyfreedompodcast.com is probably the easiest thing. It's so much of what I would be telling someone in a one-on-one conversation already exists in the zeitgeist at this point. That's one of the things that I really enjoyed about having a podcast is being able to eliminate some of those individual conversations and just say, hey, that thing that you want to talk about, go check out episode 24. We talk about it for an hour. If you have any questions after that, feel free to hit me up.
Yeah.
But anyways.
I love it, man. Thank you. Awesome. James,
as far as on social, if you I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
No,
for somebody
good.
who's like, I want to have the person, not just the podcast, but sell me on your stupid podcast. You can find me on, really any of the social channels. The ones I'm most active on are Facebook and LinkedIn. You can just search my name, James Jenkins, and I'll be happy to connect with you.
Awesome, man. I love it. It's been an absolute pleasure, my friend. Thank you for being on the show. Until next time, friends, grow big or go home.